Hello, everybody. Omni here. I just wanted to talk about the new Fantastic Beasts film, The Crimes of Grindelwald. Now, I really enjoyed the first movie. I think Eddie Redmayne's portrayal of Newt Scamander really made him a likable, fun, and enjoyable character to watch, and especially his screen presence was really great. The first movie was very focused, contained, and had a lot of fun and lots of new magical things to add to it, especially with all the different creatures, I mean, beasts that we see throughout the film. And even the addition of Dan Fogler as Jacob Kowalski was a great, enjoyable addition to be his little companion through the majority of the events throughout the movie. Definitely having a non-magic perspective throughout gave some entertaining levity and a different viewpoint we haven't really had too much in the franchise up until this point, and I really dug that about it. It was definitely a simple plot. Um, we are introduced to a new type of magical creature, the Obscurial, in Credence, Barebone, and you know, it's a being of pure negative energy, essentially. If that results from a witch or wizard restraining or um, repressing their magical abilities over a certain amount of time, that repression of their powers eventually manifests itself in a negative way and becomes this creature. Usually, it will kill a young child if they are. Most obscurials are children who don't ever learn to use their powers or use them at all, and usually they die at a young age. It is unheard of for one to exist over a increased period of time. Credence, I believe, is in his early 20s in the first film, and it turns out that for those who haven't seen the first movie, because it's a major plot point in this one, still, Credence is an obscurial. And this film picks up almost the beginning of the film, the opening of the film, which is a really beautiful and fantastic opening. So good. We see a little bit of it in the trailers. It's Grindelwald is being transported from New York to London and makes his escape. I'm not going to go into any spoilers in this review of the movie, just because the movie is still in theaters. I might do a spoiler review later, just fill in some of the things about the finer details of the film that kind of bothered me or stood out as amazing, whichever. Um, I'm not going to go into too many specifics in this review. Um, but we continue to follow after the escape of Grindelwald in the opening sequence of this film. We get a 3-month jump to where we're back with Newt Scamander. Now, as we've seen in the trailer, he is charged with tracking down and still finding Credence. The main driving plot of this seems to fall on Credence himself, trying to discover his actual roots, and it comes down to being a race, but for or a race between Newt and Grindelwald as to finding Credence, as essentially as it was in the first film. As with the title, we get a lot of new creatures, a lot of great magical sequences. The special effects in this film are really great. The direction is on point. The special effects are amazing, and we get many a good scene with Jude Law performing as a young Albus Dumbledore, and this is where the parts of the film shine. The performances in this film are really great, and most notably from Jude Law and his portrayal of a younger Dumbledore. And Johnny Depp really gets to shine every scene that he is in, and it's not in the usual Johnny Depp way like he does in any of his costumed accented characters that he likes to play. He doesn't go over the top with any of his stuff in this. He's very reserved, contained, and he gives a really captivating performance as Grindelwald. Like, you can he when he enters the room, you definitely feel his pull, that gravitas that he brings to it, but he never goes into that Johnny Depp mode that we know him from in recent films of his. And I honestly have to commend him for that, because it was the best part. Every scene Grindelwald in is so enjoyable to watch. And even with Dumbledore, like, it's really great how Jude Law channels this younger Dumbledore. Those two characters are the highlights of this film. Eddie Redmayne as Newt Scamander is still enjoyable to watch, um, but we've seen that we've seen that character, and we kind of get a feel for him in the first movie. His personality doesn't grow or shift or evolve that much in this film, which is fine, because I still enjoy that character and love that character. We get a little more of his backstory, because his brother and leader Lestrange show up in this film. So there's a little bit of filling in that goes into their relationship, because it's mostly just hinted at in the first film. No details, again. Um, Again, we get as with this franchise, we get a lot of great settings. And the best part, I think, is we get a little more of an expansion on the wizarding world, because we get, as we saw in the first Fantastic Beasts, we visited the U.S. Ministry of Magic. We get to see the inner workings of an early British Ministry of Magic, and their trail brings them to France. The largest chunk of the film takes place in France, and we get to see the French Ministry of Magic. So we get to see different ways that the international scope of the wizarding world kind of operates, and I think that's really great. Aside from all of that, we get some great cinematography in this. There's so many great sequences and shots, um, and honestly, the best parts of the film are the opening and the ending. But the film is not perfect. It is, in my opinion, personal opinion, the first film is a better film. It was more focused, the plot was more driven, and I feel a little more personal. And I would say that's mostly because it had a tighter chain of events. This movie, I think, suffers mostly because they want to stretch this out into more films. Originally, this was just going to be a trilogy. There's going to be a Fantastic Beasts 1, 2, and 3, and then we would conclude. And I'm not sure how that formula is going to progress now, because I can't remember how long ago it was, but they have confirmed that this will indeed be five Fantastic Beast films. So what this film suffers from the most, too many subplots. The first film was such an enjoyable ride because it was focused. The subplots were to a minimum, and our goal was very clear. There are a series of plots that just kind of daisy chain themselves together throughout this film. It's almost like one starts and stops, and then another one takes its place until we get to the ending of the film. This definitely feels like a movie that is just setting up for more. And I think that's where any film that does that, there's very few that do this and it works. One I can name off the top of my head, of course, is Empire Strikes Back. There's a bunch of elements in this film that I feel like, since they are dragging this out into 5 movies, that they could have spread some of these plots out. I don't think that there's a few things that happen in this film that don't really contribute to the overall stakes that are in play at the time this film is taking place. There's a bunch of things that are also in this film that are kind of only there for fan service reasons. And there's a plot twist later at the end of the film as well that has a lot of hardcore Potter fans scratching their brains in confusion to figure out and unravel. And until we get some kind of conclusion or some kind of further evidence, no one really knows where this comes from. There's a lot of theories already as for what the twist at the end means or what it could mean. And I've got a couple of theories myself. I wouldn't say anything that other people haven't already thought of, but this movie suffers the most from being completely unfocused, which is sad because all of the technical elements of this film are really good. The action, the performances, the settings, the effects, the cinematography, everything, technically speaking, is a great film. And there's a lot of fun sequences. There's a lot of new magic, new creatures, and stuff like that to pull our attention. But the meat and potatoes of the film, the plot, the story, suffers from not being contained and focused to the drive. If it was just Newt Grindelwald race to get Credence and then the reveal of whatever Credence's origin is, that would be fine. However, there are too many other subplots sprinkled in this movie that just kind of weigh it down. There's a lot of points in the film where it just kind of, all the action and the pacing is grinds to a halt for some subplot or background plot or flashback explanation to something that in the end doesn't really matter, just kind of weighs the movie down a little bit. And that's another thing, is all the subplots kind of mess with the pacing of the film. It just kind of stops and goes throughout. It's not a bad movie. It's just a little, I'd say, disappointing. And the ending is, I would say, the way the film wraps up is very, very anticlimactic, especially with all the buildup. And I think that all comes down to them wanting to extend this into a 5 film franchise instead of 3. And I don't know how they can, because they did say that Eddie Redmayne will star as Newt Scamander in the full extent of these films. Because my initial theory was like, maybe this will eventually, maybe we'll get some time skips here and there, but this would eventually kind of do what The Hobbit did with that trilogy that came out in theaters, kind of lead us right into the start of the Harry Potter franchise, or at least lead us right into, maybe say, the death of Harry's parents. Let's say the 5th movie comes around and we see this chain of events that have evolved from Grindelwald and his mission and his push on the wizarding world leads into the Tom Riddle story that inspires him to start his own dark army. Like, he is inspired by Grindelwald's actions, and then there's a call to arms with him, and the final shot of the last Fantastic Beasts film would be him killing the Potters. And there we have a full circle event out of this new franchise that ties us back into the one we grew up with and started with. But I don't know at this point how long they're going to be stretching this Grindelwald thing out. If that's going to be the focus of all 5 of these movies, is Grindelwald and Newt and Dumbledore, I don't know how we'll get there. Aside from that, I still love this franchise, and I am not disheartened in this at all. Hopefully the feedback or gets taken into play, and the next film will be a little more tighter and more focused. And again, none of this is on the film itself technically. It's just the writing behind it. It was done in a way that seems like it was written in the form of a book. And this was written by J.K. Rowling. She did the screenplay for this. And it feels like she didn't get detached from the mindset of writing a novel versus a film, because you got a much shorter window in a film. And I feel like she tried to cram a little too much into this rather than feeding it out throughout the rest of the franchise. But all in all, if I had to rate it out of 10, I'd say I'd give it about a 7. I would definitely give this movie a 7, mostly because of how great all the performances involved this film were. and the visual effects, everything that really brings this world to life, shown so much in this film. It's just the plot that kind of drug the film down, I think, for me. It was just a little too bloated. It wasn't focused, and I keep saying focused because it didn't have one. And that was the hardest thing about the film to follow, because it just seemed like every minute it wanted to be a different story. Anyway, guys, I would love to know what you all thought. If you've seen it yet, if you would like to know my thoughts on the spoiler aspects of this film, I might do that later when the film's had a little more time to be out in the public eye. But let me know what you guys think in the comments. And if you want to get my initial guttural reactions to anything I'm watching, whether it be movies, TV shows, make sure to follow me on that Stardust app. And yeah, like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll be back with whatever's next. I'll catch you guys later.